My name is Camille. I'm 31 years old. The hum of the projector was the only sound in the room, that soft, mechanical whir that always reminded me of old film reels. Except this wasn't nostalgia. This was theft, playing out in real time. The boardroom lights had been dimmed, but not enough to hide the smug curve of Mark's mouth as he stood at the front. My manager. My mentor, once. Now, the man stealing 6 weeks of my life. My late nights, my brainstorms, my color-coded mock-ups, claiming every slide as his own. We wanted something modern but rooted in the brand's legacy. This evolution? It's not just aesthetic. It's strategy. His voice rolled through the dim room like he was giving a TED Talk. Smooth, confident, almost bored in how certain he was that no one would question him. He clicked to the next slide. My slide. The curve of the redesigned UI appeared, glowing faintly blue under the projector light. The asymmetric navigation I'd fought for during review. The contrast ratios I'd tested at 2 a.m. on my couch while my eyes stung from exhaustion. He'd even kept my transition timing, half a second slower than standard, to create that emotional pause I had built for the reveal. I saw it instantly. The faint corner watermark I'd once included in early drafts. Gone. Of course, he'd scrubbed it, but what he didn't know was that I had left something deeper. My palms sat flat against the smooth table, hidden beneath the edge. My fingers were cold. Not from fear, but from restraint. I didn't speak, didn't blink. I just listened. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee from the hallway machine. Someone shifted in their leather chair. The slide advanced again. Applause followed. The senior VP nodded, a pleased smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. Alan, the CEO, leaned forward, elbows on the table. His glasses reflected the slide like small square mirrors. "This feels fresh," Alan said, his tone clipped and impressed. "Finally, the client's going to love it." A few soft chuckles floated from the far side of the table. Marketing. Finance. Even Cheryl from legal smiled, that knowing kind of smile people wear when they think they've just witnessed success. I stayed still. My pulse barely moved. Because the truth was already in motion, buried, encoded, planted. My name was hiding inside the system like a heartbeat under ice. 2 weeks earlier, the first crack had appeared, a sudden shift in Mark's tone. Shorter emails, late replies. "Let me handle this one." "No need to join the call." Little cuts that looked harmless, until they didn't. He'd stopped including me in update meetings. Stopped looping me in on design reviews I had started. And then, one evening, I'd seen it. My own deck on the shared drive. Same file size, same color profile, same layouts, renamed, reshuffled, time-stamped 2 days before he told me he was just getting started. He was setting it up even then. That night, the office had gone quiet around me. The cleaning crew's vacuum hummed down the hallway. I sat alone at my desk, the blue light of my monitor reflecting on the metal rim of my coffee cup. The cursor blinked beside my code. Waiting. I had built a tiny script that embedded a traceable string, my initials, a timestamp, and a version signature into the design file metadata. Invisible on the surface, impossible to erase without breaking the file. It was my quiet rebellion, hidden in plain sight. When I hit save, I whispered to myself, "Go ahead, Mark. Take it." Friday afternoon came. He posted an update in the group chat. "Looking forward to showing off our design direction next week. Thanks to the team for pushing hard on this." No mention of my name. Not even a vague nod. I stared at the message until the text blurred. He walked past my desk not long after, Yeti tumbler in hand, whistling something off-key. "Got any fun weekend plans?" he asked, casual, like we hadn't spent months building something side by side. "Yeah," I said softly. "Planting something." He chuckled, oblivious. "Ha, nice. I'll be prepping for the big show Monday." "I bet you will." I smiled then, a quiet, closed-lip smile that he didn't recognize as goodbye. That weekend, I slept better than I had in months. I didn't check Slack, didn't open my laptop. I let him build his stage while I built the trap beneath it. The morning of the presentation came cold. Nashville spring was supposed to be warm, but the air carried a stubborn chill. The office thermostat hadn't caught up yet, and the boardroom felt like a refrigerator. My fingers curled around my coffee cup for warmth as people filed in. VPs, department heads, HR, everyone with titles and opinions. Mark set up the projector, his laptop cable snaking across the table. The smell of dry erase markers lingered from an earlier meeting. I sat near the back, my notebook open, a calm expression masking the quiet anticipation that pulsed under my skin. Alan started the meeting with his usual measured authority. "This is a pivotal quarter for us," he said. "Let's see what you've been working on, Mark. I'd like to go deeper today. Can you walk us through the live demo, not just the slides?" That moment hit like a heartbeat. Mark froze for half a second too long before nodding. "Of course," he said, voice catching slightly. "Let me just open the source files." He turned back to the screen, fingers moving across the trackpad. The projector light washed his face in a pale glow. He opened the folder labeled Final Presentation Assets. The file loaded. The first screen appeared, clean, elegant, alive with motion, and in the lower right corner, just below the navigation bar, a faint, translucent text appeared, created by Camille W., April 4th, 2025. The silence hit the room like a wave. A pause so complete it had a sound of its own. He didn't notice it at first, but Alan did. I saw the exact second his eyes narrowed, catching the detail. His head tilted, confused. He looked at Mark, then at the screen again. "Wait," someone murmured. Mark fumbled with the trackpad. "Let's move on," he said quickly, clicking to slide 2. Slide 2 had it too. The same signature, same timestamp. Slide 3. The UI mockup. My user notes, layered behind the interface, flickered faintly before rendering in. My handwriting visible where I'd annotated design margins. Alan stood. The scrape of his chair echoed across the room. "Mark," he said, his voice low but sharp. "What is this?" Mark blinked. The room's attention pinned him to the wall. "This, must be a mistake. Maybe Camille uploaded an old draft?" Alan didn't respond. He turned his head slowly toward me. "Camille, would you join me up front?" Every pair of eyes followed me as I rose. My heels clicked against the floor, soft but deliberate. I walked past Mark, past the laptop that had betrayed him, and stopped by the screen. The light from the projector made my hands glow faintly as I reached for the remote. "Everything you're seeing," I said, my voice even, steady, calm, "has been watermarked and time-stamped from the original design suite, embedded in every prototype, verified in version history. I can show you the log." The words felt almost detached coming out of me, like I'd rehearsed them in another life. Alan looked from me to the screen, then back again. "Why wasn't this attributed properly?" he asked. No one answered. HR shifted. Cheryl from legal flipped open her notebook. The marketing VP stared down at her pen as if afraid to meet anyone's eyes. "This is ridiculous," Mark said finally, his voice rising with forced laughter. "Camille must have uploaded these files by mistake. She's probably confused." I turned my head just slightly. "The mistake," I said quietly, "was thinking I'd stay quiet." That sentence landed heavier than I expected. It hung there, suspended in the air between us. Mark's face lost its color. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The room waited, still and watching. Even the hum of the projector seemed quieter, as if the machine itself understood the weight of silence. Alan broke it first. "We'll need to review this," he said to legal. "Immediately." Cheryl nodded, already typing. I stood there, still, holding the remote, the light washing over both of us. For the first time, I saw fear replace arrogance in his eyes. And I didn't gloat, didn't smile. I just stood there, calm and deliberate, as the truth did the work for me. He didn't say anything for a while, not when Alan closed the file, not when Cheryl asked for a 10-minute break, not even when I walked back to my seat and sat down without looking at him. The room was still thick with the aftertaste of tension, the kind of silence that hums under the skin. I could feel the heat radiating from where he sat, a jittery, panicked warmth that people give off when their lies start to decay in public. His breath came unevenly, shallow, and his fingers fidgeted with the stainless steel tumbler in front of him. The faint click of the cap twisting open, shut, open again. A nervous metronome. I stared straight ahead, eyes fixed on the reflection of the projector light bouncing off the glass wall. My pulse was slow now, calm, too calm, maybe. The adrenaline had already passed through me, replaced by something colder. Watching him panic was like watching the tide recede after a storm. You don't cheer, you just notice what's left behind. No one said a word to me during the break. They didn't need to. The silence itself was an acknowledgement. People avoided eye contact, scrolling on their phones or pretending to check emails. But their posture told the truth. Shoulders tighter, spines straighter, glances darting toward me when they thought I wouldn't notice. The unspoken realization hung in the air. They'd been clapping for the wrong person. When we returned, the room felt smaller, the air cooler. Chairs that once leaned back in confidence were now pulled close to the table. Fingers rested on pens instead of coffee cups. Alan's tone was steady when he spoke. "Camille, would you mind showing us the version history in the design suite?" "Of course." My voice came out smooth, steady, grounded. I stood, walked to the front again. The projector whirred softly behind me as I opened my laptop. My reflection hovered faintly on the dark screen before it came alive with color. I logged into the design cloud, the two-factor code pulsing on my phone before unlocking the archive. "This folder shows the initial wireframes, March 12th, I said. "Next version, April 1st. Color system implemented. April 4th. Final mock-ups completed. All under my profile ID, company verified." The timestamps lined up in neat rows. The cursor hovered over each version like a heartbeat. Cheryl leaned forward, glasses low on her nose. "And Mark's name doesn't appear anywhere in the editing history?" "Not until April 10th, I said. "That's when he downloaded the exported slides." "No edits, just access." The screen didn't lie. Every line of metadata glowed like quiet proof. Alan's expression didn't change much, no anger, just a slow, weighted disappointment. He looked over at Mark. "That's a problem." Mark's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. The kind of expression people wear when they're drowning but still hoping someone will believe it's just a swim. "It's possible there was a miscommunication," he said, his tone reaching for charm and landing on desperation. "I thought Camille was still iterating, and I presented the final to you in your office," I said. "April 5th. You told me, and I quote, 'Let's hold it for now.' Then the following week, you said you'd take it from here." His face stiffened. I don't recall saying that." "I recorded the meeting," I said quietly. "It's on our internal Zoom archive. I can pull the transcript if needed." The silence that followed was heavier than the first. Cheryl looked down at her notes. HR's pen stopped moving. The air conditioner hummed faintly, filling the space where words refused to live. Mark's hands dropped to his lap, his fingers locked together, white at the knuckles. Alan exhaled slowly and pushed his chair back. The soft scrape of wood against tile sounded final. "Camille, you've been reporting to Mark since Q3, right?" "Yes." "Consider this your official notice of reassignment. You'll report directly to me for now. HR will coordinate next steps." Mark's voice cracked before it fully formed. "Alan, come on. We've worked together for years." "Exactly," Alan said, "and that makes this harder." The words landed like a verdict. I sat back down. The leather seat felt cooler now, like the air around me had changed temperature. I didn't gloat, didn't smile, just watched him swallow the truth he'd tried to bury. But this moment, this unraveling, hadn't started today. It had started 3 months ago, the first time he reworded one of my concept emails before forwarding it to the team. Back then, I'd convinced myself it was a mistake, that he'd meant to include my name in the thread and just forgot. Then it happened again. And again. Each time smaller, subtler, easier for him to justify. And for me to excuse. The worst was that Thursday night in February. I'd stayed until 11 p.m., eyes dry, headphones humming with white noise as I built the Figma transitions pixel by pixel. The next morning, I passed the break room and heard him explaining it to the others. My process, my idea, like a story he'd lived himself. Yeah, around 2 a.m., I finally cracked it, he'd said, pouring coffee like it was a casual anecdote. I remember standing outside that doorway, the smell of roasted beans and stale creamer hanging in the air, his laughter echoing off the walls. I didn't step inside. I just stood there, invisible, listening to my own work retold in someone else's voice. It wasn't just about credit. It was about erasure, about identity. Every stolen sentence was an hour I didn't spend calling my sister before her move to Denver. Every overwritten file was another night I didn't book that weekend trip I'd promised myself. My name, my life, peeled off his slides like it was a post-it note. And for what? A faster handshake with the C-suite? A better spot on the org chart? I didn't tell anyone. Not then. Because they liked him. Because he was charming in that practiced corporate way. Because if I spoke up, it would sound like ego. Like a junior designer too sensitive to team dynamics. So instead, I started documenting. Quietly, consistently. I saved every draft, every file, every Slack message. Each timestamp became a breadcrumb in a trail he didn't know he was leaving behind. My diary wasn't written in words. It was made of version histories and data logs. By the time he scheduled the boardroom presentation, I already had the watermark code embedded in the design suite. Not visible to the human eye, but traceable through the source structure. A digital fingerprint that couldn't be scrubbed. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about proof. Permanence. The night before the presentation, I opened the file one last time. Watched the layers render, one over the other, until my embedded signature flickered faintly in the metadata window. I remember whispering to myself, "Sleep well, Mark." Then I closed my laptop. Earlier that same week, I'd gone to HR. I'd rehearsed what to say, palms sweating inside my jacket pockets. "Can I ask something about company IP policy?" I'd said to the HR associate, a woman named Marlene with kind eyes but careful words. "Of course," she said. "Is this hypothetical?" Not anymore. That pause had said everything. She didn't ask for details. She didn't stop me either. She just handed me a printout of the clause that defined creative ownership. I folded it carefully and placed it in my drawer. When the truth finally broke open in the boardroom, I didn't need anger to speak for me. The record did. Alan closed my laptop now, his fingers resting briefly on the lid as if to punctuate the moment. "We'll take it from here," he said. "Camille, thank you. This work is strong. Very strong." I nodded once. My throat felt tight, not from nerves, but from release. Because for the first time in months, I didn't have to prove who I was. The work had already done that. Mark stood slowly, his tumbler hanging from his fingertips. He looked smaller somehow, his shoulders no longer filling the space they once did. The confidence had drained out of him like air from a punctured tire. He didn't speak, didn't argue, just stood there in the fading projector light, a man who thought he'd be the star of the show, and instead became the cautionary tale. By the time I got back to my desk, the open office had gone quiet. Not silent, but that heavy, loaded quiet that falls when everyone pretends to keep working. The low hum of conversation thinned into whispers, keyboards clicked softer, and the air conditioning filled in the gaps where words should have been. I could feel eyes flicker in my direction, quick and guilty, before sliding away to screens and half-finished coffee cups. I sat down slowly, every movement deliberate. My chair creaked as I leaned back, my pulse still steady from the boardroom. I set my bag beside me, the faint leather smell mixing with printer toner and cold air. The glow from my monitor lit my hands as I clicked open my inbox. The first email at the top wasn't from HR. It was from Beth in UI Research. Her name surprised me. Beth was quiet, observant, the kind of person who rarely spoke in meetings unless she had something worth saying. The subject line was simple. Just saw what happened. Inside, Just 2 lines. Beth. For what it's worth, I always knew those slides had your fingerprints all over them. I stared at that word. Fingerprints. It stayed with me longer than it should have, because that's exactly what it felt like. My fingerprints, pressed into everything but invisible. Every color choice, every flow, every sentence of presentation copy, touched by me, reshaped by him. My work had lived under his name, faceless and borrowed, like a ghost he never thought would haunt him. Until now. The second email came minutes later. Subject, well done. From someone in finance I barely knew. Just 1 line. You held your ground like a pro. That one made my chest tighten in a way I didn't expect. I didn't reply. Didn't type thank you or send an emoji. I just sat there, hands folded, letting it all sink in. It wasn't relief yet. It was something quieter, like standing in the middle of a room after the music stops. The echoes still hang in the air, but the performance is done. An hour later, HR called me in. Their office smelled faintly of paper and instant coffee. The blinds were half open, letting stripes of afternoon sunlight crawl across the floor. The walls were decorated with posters about teamwork, motivation, inclusivity, corporate mantras printed in cheerful fonts that didn't match the room's energy. Angela from HR sat across from me. She was in her 40s, steady voice, eyes that carried the exhaustion of too many damage control meetings. Camille, she said, motioning for me to sit. We're reviewing Mark's conduct, but we'd like to understand your timeline. When did you first realize credit wasn't being attributed properly? Her tone was kind but cautious, like she already knew the story and just needed to hear it out loud. I took a slow breath and started from January. I didn't dramatize anything, just laid out the facts, the forwarded emails missing my signature, the projects he presented alone, the calls I was mysteriously left out of, the pattern that started as coincidence and turned into strategy. Angela typed quietly, nodding as I spoke. Her nails tapped softly on the keyboard. Do you have these emails saved? She asked. All of them, I said. I backed up everything once it started repeating. She stopped typing for a second. Her eyes lifted to meet mine, and I saw it. The recognition. Not surprise, recognition. You did the right thing, she said. Quiet doesn't mean weak, it just means strategic. That line hit deeper than she knew. I exhaled slowly, the first real breath I'd taken since morning. For the first time that day, I didn't feel like I was fighting gravity. They kept Mark out of the office for the rest of the week. Officially, he was on leave. Unofficially, he was a ghost. His name vanished from team calls, his Slack account went dark, and by Friday, the org chart updated. His position marked vacant. No one mentioned him. Not out loud. That's the thing about corporate shame. It doesn't explode. It seeps. It whispers through hallways and Slack channels, disguised as silence. People don't gossip because they're afraid to sound like the person who might be next. By Monday, my desk had been moved, closer to Alan's office. A new setup, new view, same worn-out keyboard. There was a small gold nameplate waiting for me. My name etched clean, no smudges. Underneath it, 2 words that hadn't existed a week ago. Design Strategist Lead. No one said congratulations. They just nodded when I passed. Some with respect, some with guilt, some with both. You can tell a lot about people by how they look at you after pretending not to see you for months. That afternoon, Alan called me in. His office was larger than I remembered. The walls of glass overlooked downtown Nashville, where clouds were thickening over the skyline. The light was gray, reflective, the kind that made everything look like memory. He was standing when I walked in, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. He gestured toward the chair across from his desk. Camille, he said, I owe you an apology. We should have seen it sooner. I didn't rush to answer. I just met his eyes. You weren't looking, I said. That's all. He nodded once, no defense, just understanding. We're giving you full authorship credit in the client proposal, he said. I've already updated the file history and team memo. It'll be official by tomorrow. Thank you, I said softly. He leaned back, folding his arms. You handled this with a lot more grace than most would have. That word again, grace. People use it like a compliment, but to me it sounded like camouflage. Grace just means staying quiet while you bleed. I stood, smoothing my blazer sleeve. He built his success on my work, I said. So I built my revenge into his presentation. Alan blinked. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. He didn't know whether to smile or stay serious, but his eyes said it all. He understood. The message wasn't just for Mark. It was for every person who clapped too early, every leader who mistook silence for submission. I didn't need a stage. I needed proof. And when the truth finally surfaced, it didn't need volume. It had evidence. When I left his office, the hallway lights seemed brighter than usual. A shaft of sunlight had broken through the clouds outside, spilling across the glass partitions. My phone buzzed with new messages, meeting invites, client updates. The world had kept moving, but something fundamental had shifted. The air felt lighter as I walked past the design bay. People glanced up, nodded. Some smiled in that cautious, testing way, trying to see how I'd carry my new title. I didn't gloat. I didn't soften either. At my new desk, I ran my hand along the smooth edge, the faint hum of computers around me creating a low, steady rhythm. Outside the window, downtown Nashville stretched out beneath a muted sky, streets glinting with post-rain shimmer. It felt different now. The building didn't feel like a cage anymore. It felt like something that finally knew me. Not the quiet, compliant version they hired, but the one who had been sharpening in silence all along. It's strange how fast someone can disappear. One day, they're running meetings, pacing the floor like they own it, commanding attention with every half-smile and polished word. And then, gone. No announcement, no farewell email, just absence. Mark's office sat dark for weeks. The glass wall still bore his name in white vinyl lettering, a ghost of authority that no one dared touch. The blinds stayed half open, showing an empty desk, a cold coffee mug, a plant drooping in the corner that no one watered. Even the interns started taking the long way around to avoid passing it, like the air near that door might remember too much. The truth hadn't just ended him. It cracked open something deeper. Not just about him, but about the system that let him thrive in the first place. It exposed what silence really costs, and how often people like me, people who don't fit neatly into the loudest rooms, learn to swallow it, because we're taught that grace means endurance, that patience earns respect, that waiting quietly is professional. But grace doesn't get your name on the pitch. Grace doesn't get your raise. Grace doesn't protect your work when someone else decides it's theirs. I had learned that the hard way, and now I was done being quiet. Alan scheduled a meeting with me and our West Coast client that Thursday, a follow-up to finalize the design presentation and discuss next quarter's roadmap. We met in the smaller boardroom this time. No glass walls, no long table meant to impress. Just 6 chairs, a projector, and a table that still smelled faintly of dry erase cleaner. I arrived early. I always did. The morning light spilled through the narrow window blinds, cutting thin stripes across the wood grain. I wore a navy blue blazer, plain white blouse, black trousers, no prints, no distractions. Just sharp. A reflection of what I wanted to project now. Clarity, not apology. When Alan and the clients joined, I didn't feel that nervous tremor that used to follow me into meetings. My hands were steady as I connected my laptop, the HDMI cable sliding in with a faint click. The projector hummed to life. My slides appeared, clean, bright, my name written in the bottom corner. Lead designer, Camille W. It was a small detail, but seeing it there, visible, permanent, made something settle inside me, like a bone finally set back in place. Sharon, the client lead, leaned forward with a smile. "You're the one who built the mobile-first framework, right?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "That was part of the March update cycle. We also realigned accessibility contrast for the V3 beta." She nodded, impressed. "It's smart, elegant. We've been burned before by teams that overpromised and underdelivered. This doesn't feel like that." Her voice was warm, confident. For a moment, the sound washed over me like sunlight after a storm. I smiled. Not out of pride, but recognition. It had been so long since someone looked at my work and actually saw me, not the polished product filtered through someone else's name. Just me. After the meeting ended, Alan held the door open as we walked out. The hallway smelled faintly of new carpet and coffee grounds. "That went well," he said. "You've got a presence when you speak." I adjusted my bag strap and smiled slightly. "Takes practice." He nodded. "We're reassigning mentorships in the department. I'd like you to take on the 2 junior hires this summer. Show them what real ownership looks like." I paused, my hand resting on the doorframe. "Only if they get credit for what they build." Alan chuckled softly. "Of course." But I didn't laugh, not even a flicker of a smile. I meant it. That weekend, the apartment was quiet except for the steady hum of the fridge. I sat at my kitchen counter with a legal pad and a pen, the kind of stillness that makes you confront yourself. I started writing a list, not out of anger, but clarity. Every project I'd stayed silent on. Every idea that got reshaped into someone else's contribution. Every time I'd heard "we" instead of "you." The page filled faster than I expected. Not out of bitterness, but record keeping. I wasn't revisiting old wounds. I was documenting proof that I had survived them. When I finished, I poured myself a glass of water, stared at the list, and whispered, "No more." Then I opened my laptop, printed the email logs, the version histories, the meeting transcript from April 5th, the one where Mark had said, "Let's hold it for now." Every piece of evidence I had kept not out of spite, but instinct. Monday morning, I walked into HR carrying a sealed manila folder. The office was quiet, the kind of post-lunch lull where keyboards sounded too loud. Angela looked up from her desk when I entered. "Camille?" she said, standing. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said. "I'm not here to complain. I'm here to close a chapter." Her brow softened. I placed the folder on her desk. "I'd like this added to the official file regarding Mark's exit." Angela hesitated before taking it, her fingers brushing the edge of the envelope. "Thank you," she said. We'll include it in the incident record." "I don't need anything else," I said. "I just need it written down." That mattered to me, more than I realized until I said it aloud. Not for revenge, not for validation, but for history, for accountability. Because somewhere down the line, another woman would walk into that same boardroom. She'd stand in front of a screen filled with her ideas, her slides, her designs. And if someone ever tried to erase her, she wouldn't be starting from silence. Maybe she'd never know my name. Maybe she'd never read the file I'd left behind. But she'd inherit a company that had documentation, a trail of truth, a reminder that quiet doesn't mean invisible, and that grace, when necessary, can wear steel instead of silk. Spring slid into summer in Nashville. The humidity arrived like a blanket, thick, heavy, and impossible to ignore. The mornings smelled faintly of wet pavement and magnolia blooms, the air dense enough to slow your breath. But inside the office, things felt lighter. Maybe not for everyone, but for me. I took the corner seat in the design pod now, the one that used to belong to someone who saw my work as his stepping stone. Now, it was my space, my desk, my view. The sunlight hit differently through the glass there, warmer somehow, unfiltered. I brought plants, little ones, succulents mostly. Quiet, resilient, the kind that didn't demand much but stayed alive anyway. I liked that about them. The new interns started that Monday. 2 women, Lila and Zoe, both younger than me by nearly a decade, nervous, sharp, full of energy they hadn't yet learned to guard. They came in early, coffee cups in hand, whispering over open laptops, the kind of optimism that reminded me what it used to feel like when I thought merit alone was armor. Lila had shaky hands when she presented her first wireframe. Her voice caught on the first few words. I watched her eyes dart toward the senior lead for reassurance, then toward me. She looked small in that moment, not because she was weak, but because the room still carried the weight of hierarchy. I caught her gaze and gave her a single nod. Just once. Steady. That was all it took. Her shoulders straightened, her breathing slowed. She started again, and this time, her voice held. Later that afternoon, she appeared at my desk, knocking softly on the corner of it like she wasn't sure she was allowed. "Hey," she said, half whispering. I wanted to ask, do we usually watermark our work here? Or is that too formal? I couldn't help but smile. There it was, the question I'd been waiting for. We do now, I said. Her eyebrows lifted, curiosity flickering in her expression, but she nodded, smiling back. She understood. Maybe not fully yet, but she would. That moment felt small, but it wasn't. It was the shift. The one that didn't come with applause or announcements. The one that lived quietly, changing. Everything. Ownership was becoming part of the culture. Not because I declared it, but because I modeled it. Mark's name wasn't mentioned anymore. His office stayed dark until facilities finally removed the nameplate. Even then, no one spoke his name. The silence around him didn't protect him now. It protected us. It protected the space we were rebuilding. A week later, Alan called. I was halfway through reorganizing the design archives when his name flashed across my phone screen. Camille, he said, I've been thinking. We're speaking at the Design Summit in Austin next month. I'd like you to lead a session. I paused. On what? Authorship, he said simply. The word hit me in a place I didn't expect. I stared out the window for a second, watching sunlight reflect off car roofs in the parking lot. Only if I can tell the truth, I said. That's exactly why I'm asking, he replied. The auditorium in Austin was colder than I expected. The kind of artificial air that smells faintly of cables and fresh paint. Rows of folding chairs stretched into the distance, each seat holding a small notepad and a bottle of water. Behind the curtain, screens flickered with waiting slides. The hum of a sound check buzzed faintly in the air. I wore flats. No heels, no flash. Just a navy wrap dress and my own voice. When they introduced me, the lights were bright enough to blur faces into outlines. My heart thudded, but not from nerves, from clarity. I walked to the center of the stage, the click of my flats soft against the wood. I told them the story. Not names, not companies, just truth, the anatomy of erasure. The quiet violence of watching your own work stripped of your name. The slow rebuild of taking it back. I spoke of data trails and digital fingerprints, of leaving your proof in places no one thinks to look. I talked about resilience, not revenge, about what it means to protect your craft before anyone else will. The audience stayed silent in that attentive way that means you have them. No phones, no whispers, just breathing. When I stepped off stage, a woman with gray hair and calloused hands waited near the exit. She looked like she'd lived 100 stories of her own. She reached out and shook my hand. Her grip was strong. Thank you, she said quietly. I wish I'd known that trick 20 years ago. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Me too. We didn't need to say anything else. Some things don't need words. They just need recognition. That night, back in Nashville, I sat on my porch with a glass of cold tea. The cicadas were out again, singing their relentless song under the summer heat. Lightning bugs drifted through the trees, small sparks floating in the dark. The air was thick but calm. My laptop buzzed with notifications inside. New messages, meeting invites, even a note from HR confirming my official title update. Design Director. It should have felt like triumph. But I didn't open the laptop. I didn't need to see numbers or emails or applause. I just leaned back in my chair and watched the sky deepen into night. The crickets, the wind through the trees, the steady rhythm of something whole again. My name was safe now, my work. Finally mine. He took credit once. But in the end, the only thing Mark got to keep was the silence he thought I'd stay in. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.